Welcome to Average Joe's Pool. So Valhalla are very well known for making some of the best playing budget cues out there, but they also make jump and break cues. But are they any good? Well, we're going to find out as we jump into the world of Valhalla's Jump Break 2. So the cue that we have here for review today has been kindly supplied to us direct from Viking for review, and this is Valhalla's dedicated jump and break cue, better known as the Jump Break 2. Now, if you're not already familiar with the Valhalla brand, Valhalla is owned and operated by Viking. And Viking are a very well-known pool cue manufacturer based in the USA. And when it comes to Viking's cues, all of their Viking branded products are actually made by Viking at their own factory. However, when it comes to the Valhalla brand, which is precisely what we have here, these are more budget orientated cues, and so these are manufactured for Viking in China. And when it comes to this particular sector of the Valhalla Cue lineup, what we have here, this is the Jump Break 2, which of course is a jump and break cue. However, this cue also has two siblings. First up, we have a cue that's almost visually identical to what we have here. That is the Break 2, which is a 100% dedicated break cue. And then additionally, we have a cue that actually looks very different to what we have here, and that's Valhalla's dedicated jump cue, the Jump 2. But of course, when it comes to this particular cue, this is the only one that can do both of those jobs in one cue, both breaking and jumping. Now, when it comes to options, there is only one version of this cue available, and that's precisely what you can see here, finished in black. When it comes to weight, however, there are far more options available. You can get this anywhere from 18 through to 21 ounces, including half-ounce increments. And one of the big bonuses when it comes to Valhalla pool cues is they are supplied complete with a lifetime warranty, and that does include cover against warpage. And when it comes to price for Valhalla's dedicated jump and break cue, this comes in at $220. And this cue is available to buy on Amazon. So if you're interested in buying one of these, then we will add those Amazon links into the video description for you. So please help to support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool. If you are going to be buying one, please be sure to click on our Amazon links. So now we've got the basics down on this dual purpose wonder, we need to know a little bit more detail. Let's have a look at the spec check.
And I can froth at the mouth something horrid. Do you want to see it? I can imagine.
Now, perhaps the most obvious feature of our Jump Break 2 is simply the fact that it is a combination cue, both breaking and jumping all in one. And one of the key essential features for any combination cue such as this is the joint between the jump handle and the break handle. What you want to see is a quick release joint, so you can quickly get the break handle out of the way to convert this to a jump cue. And thankfully that's precisely what we have here with the Jump Break 2. Now, setting that aside, what we do have here is a relatively low-key cue. And Viking have purposefully designed the Jump Break 2 to have this very modern, sleek, sporty look to it. And this cue is made from Michigan maple, and we have HD graphic transfers for the logos, including the main logo that we have here, which adds to that sporty look of the cue, finished in orange and silver. And to complement that logo, also finished in orange, either side of our joint, we have some contrasting stripes. And we have a steel joint here, and our pin size is 5/16 by 18. And to complement our joint, we also have a stainless steel butt cap as well, and that's also etched with the Valhalla by Viking logo. And additionally, for logos on the end of our rubber bumper, we have the Twin Lightning Valhalla logo, which is also repeated at the base of the shaft. And talking about the shaft, the first couple of inches at the base here have been varnished to help protect the logo. And for the profile that we have here on the shaft, this is described by Viking as being a strong taper. Looking at it, the profile is not hugely different to the profile that you'll find on the standard Valhalla playing cues, perhaps carrying a little bit more weight around this central section just here. And we do have an orange line that appears to have been printed on to help kind of differentiate a little bit between the two. Now that is in contrast to what the actual spec says for this cue. This is currently described as having a high impact ferrule and a hard leather tip. However, this is definitely phenolic, and we have confirmed that with Viking, and it is a mistake on the website, and hopefully that will be updated by the time that you come to see this video. With regards to ferrule length, if we measure it up to that orange line, 19.84 millimeters. And the tip is described as 13 millimeter. We measured it in at 12.95 millimeters. Now with regards to length, this is a 58-inch cue. And when we measured this in from tip to tail, came in at 58.5 inches. But when we deduct away from that, both the tip and the rubber bumper comes in at 58 1/16 inches. And our overall cue length consisted of a shaft length of 29 3/16 inches and a complete butt length of 29 5/16 inches. And if we break that down even further, just the jump handle, bang on 12 inches. And when we measured this for diameters, our diameter right here at the joint, 21.55 millimeters. When we took the same measurement here at the end of the jump handle, 26 millimeters. And the diameter at the end of the butt cap, 31.52 millimeters. So the cue that we have here, this is the 19-ounce version, and when we weighed this, came in at 19.05 ounces. And our complete weight consisted of a shaft weight of 4.77 ounces. And the full butt came in at 14.29 ounces. Breaking that down even further, just the jump handle, 4.7 ounces. If you want to know what the weight is for this cue whilst using it just as a jump cue, just the shaft plus the jump handle, 9.47 ounces. And with regards to weight bolts, we always like to remove the rubber butt cap and have a look inside, and this did indeed have a weight bolt. And that was a 2-ounce weight bolt that we did weigh just for good measure, came in at 2.006 ounces. And we also tested this for its centre of balance, which measured in at 20 5/16 inches. And that's measured from the rear of the cue and does include the rubber butt cap. So this is quite a forward weighted cue that puts the centre of balance right up to this kind of area here. So really that's about all that we have for features. This has been purposely designed to be a fairly simple cue. So let's go ahead and give it its score. And the Jump Break 2 has purposefully gone with a very plain but sporty black design, which seems to be a very common design with break and jump cues these days. But that aside, the cue ticks a lot of boxes when it comes to essential core features that you'd like to find on a break and jump cue. Of particular note are the quick release for the jump handle, slightly heavier taper profile, and a decent phenolic tip. So we're certainly not overburdened with features here, but everything we need, and perhaps a little bit more, is present and correct. Scoring the Jump Break 2 a very healthy 3.5 stars out of 5 for features.
I shall be glad when we get the Straightness break.
So let's run some straightness tests. And in addition to a basic visual inspection, there are 3 straightness tests to run, starting with the easiest, the table roll test. And the cue looks to roll well with no notable wobble or issues making themselves apparent. But this test really is easy peasy, so let's move things up to medium difficulty with the rail roll test. And now we're rolling the cue along the solid rail of the table, whilst carefully watching the tip for wobble. And we can clearly see that the cue is nodding as it's rolled back and forth, showing us that not everything is as straight and true as it could and should be. So finally is the hard level difficulty with the cue roller test. And this really is a tough test. And it's worth noting that it's actually quite rare and unusual to find a cue with 0 movement on the rollers. But unfortunately, the Jump Break 2 is showing more wobble than we consider acceptable, especially remembering the price of the cue. And this really is a shame for the Jump Break 2. However, it should be noted that for this test there is natural variance. And if you were to take 100 identical cues, you would get 100 slightly different results. But unfortunately for our test model, the standard of straightness that we're seeing is disappointing, scoring the Valhalla a below average 2 stars out of 5 for straightness. Next up, we're looking at deflection with the squirt test. And it should be noted that this is not really a key factor for break or jump and break cues like it is with playing cues, due to their intended purpose with regards to spin. But it's always interesting to know just for kicks. And we use a 75-inch length for this test, which is the gap on a 9-foot table between the head spot and the rear rail. And we use maximum parallel English along with a hard shot. And we'll repeat this test at least 10 times on both sides to help ensure an accurate overall average. And the Jump Break 2 did well with an average of 3 1/8 inches. Now it should be pointed out that for a playing cue that would not be a good result, but for a break and jump cue that's actually pretty decent, and also comes in a hair under Valhalla's very own dedicated break cue, the Break 2, by just 1/8 of an inch. So far so good. So next, let's take a quick look on how easy it is to apply spin for masse jump shots. And for this test, we'll place 3 balls for reference against the rear rail sights. And we'll add a blocker ball to ensure that the ball initially jumps straight before the spin kicks in. And the Jump Break 2 really excelled in this test. Not only was it relatively easy to generate spin on the cue ball, but also the cue was producing a high amount of spin and would do this consistently. And we also noted that it was particularly difficult to get this cue to miscue during these extreme shots, making it very reliable when pushed hard. So overall, it was a very impressive result for the Jump Break 2 in this test. In fact, we'd say that this is nearing about what you could expect as a realistic maximum, which is amazing considering the price tag. And our next test is a little bit of fun. We're going to be checking out how many balls we can jump with the Jump Break 2. Now we should point out that this test is not realistic under playing conditions, but it allows us to get a feel for how dynamic the cue is compared to others in what we call the Evel Knievel test. And the test process is simple. We start with one object ball, jump it, then add one more ball and repeat. And for this test, air bridges are not permitted, so it's strictly fingers on table. And once again, the Jump Break 2 made this test look super easy. We managed to clear the majority of the shots on the very first attempt. And it wasn't really until we neared the 20 ball mark that multiple attempts were required. And this excellent cue cleared 22 balls with relative ease. And so we called it a day after 4 attempts at 23 balls. We just couldn't quite get there. And so at 22 balls, that actually beats our previous personal best, which was set on the Stinger by McDermott at 21 balls. However, we have since managed to up our personal best, which was also on the Stinger, to 25 balls since testing. So it's not a personal best for the Jump Break 2, but certainly up there with the best of the best. So next up, we're moving on to some practical tests. Going to get this cue onto the table and start hitting some balls with it. And all of the products that we review here at Average Joe's Pool, we always ensure have a minimum of 5 hours of full use before we formulate an opinion, just to make sure we can give it a fair and accurate review. So now it's time for the Jump Break 2 to do some jumping and some breaking. Let's play. So our Valhalla Break Jump 2, of course, has got two very specific jobs to do, braking and jumping. So first of all, how does this perform as a brake cue? Now I should mention that we have recently reviewed Valhalla's Break 2, which is the sister cue of this particular cue, but of course the brake only version, whereas with the jump brake this does jumping and braking. And with the Break 2 we were very impressed with just how dynamic that cue was. It was superb at those brake shots. It really did have a nice pop to it, like a real snap, and it's very easy to generate decent power using the Break 2. So of course, switching over to our Jump Break 2, we're expecting identical results. After all, the specifications of those cues are virtually identical. They do appear to have the same shaft complete with the same ferrule and tip combination, with the only real difference between the two being that we have the extra joint in the middle of the butt here to allow this to break down to a jump cue. However, I do have to say that I was slightly disappointed with the Jump Break 2 as a brake cue, just bearing in mind just how good the Break 2 actually was. And that's not to take anything away from our Jump Break 2. It does brake pretty well, however it's just not quite as dynamic as the dedicated Break 2 was. Now that's not to take anything away from our Jump Break 2. When it comes to doing brakes with this cue, it is pretty decent. And no, you're probably not going to set any world records with it. However, it's certainly going to be more powerful than using your standard playing cue. So from that perspective, it does the job and does the job fairly well. So as a brake cue, overall, average. So next let's focus on the performance using the Jump Break 2 as a jump cue, because that's when this cue really does come to life. And as a jump cue, this thing really is an absolute barnstormer. It does pretty much everything you could possibly want from a jump cue. And one of the big factors that I liked using this as a jump cue was simply how easy it actually is to perform those jump shots. You don't have to work the cue particularly hard to get those jump shots moving, and you can use a little bit less power than you might do otherwise. And that can come in really handy if you're trying to do particularly short jump shots, or you want to hit it a little bit softer to try and get that spin to kick in a little bit more before it gets to its target ball. So if you're fairly new to jump shots, perhaps you're learning jump shots, then this cue is definitely an ideal choice. It makes those jumps super easy. And the other factor that I really liked is simply how far you can push this cue to its limits. And that's especially true with regards to spin. You can put a ridiculous amount of spin and this thing holds true. You do have to push it to the extreme before this thing will actually miscue. And you have to push it to a limit where basically you know it's going to miscue. So it's essentially your fault. And this is definitely one of those jump cues where it's actually very easy to apply spin. Just like it is super easy to get this to do standard jump shots, if you want to apply spin onto those shots as well, it does those with ease. And not only will it apply that spin, but it also applies a very decent amount of spin too. And remember, you can hit those shots a little bit softer than you can with some other jump cues, which means you can get that spin to really kick in. So what we have here with Valhalla's Jump Break 2 is a combination of a decent enough brake cue and a fantastically dynamic jump cue. So let's go ahead and give it its score for performance. And so whilst the Jump Break 2 may only be slightly average when it comes to brake shots, it still gets the job done. But it's when we use this cue for jumps that the cue really springs to life and becomes not only very capable, but perhaps also a little exceptional, especially considering our price tag. And so overall, we definitely have a winning combination, scoring it a strong 4.5 stars out of 5 for performance.
So flimsy you could blow peas through it.
Now when it comes to Valhalla pool cues, we have already reviewed quite a number of different models. And it must be said that we generally have quite a high expectation from Valhalla, the reason being that for the money that you're spending, the quality always seems to be excellent. And thankfully our Jump Break 2 is certainly no exception to the rule. So we have a solid black paint finish, can't see a single flaw in any of that paintwork, and complete with a very high gloss shine. And additionally the HD graphic transfers that we have for our logos and our decorative lines here, they're all pin sharp and precisely as they should be. And there's a couple of factors that tend to be very strong with the Valhallas. Not only do they use pretty decent components for the money that you're spending, but additionally the quality of the fit and finish is generally excellent. And that does continue through onto our Jump Break too. For example, when you're trying to feel the transition between these various components, they really are super smooth and precisely as they should be. And the same applies to our shaft here. We do have a nice seal on the shaft. You can feel no imperfections, no lumps, bumps, scrapes or knocks. Again, perfect. And our transition going from the shaft onto the bottom of our ferrule or our single piece tip here, you can't feel anything at all. That's absolutely flawless. So from a quality perspective, you're certainly not going to be disappointed with the Jump Break 2. Being super fussy, there's a couple of things I could probably pick up on. First of all, looking at the butt cap, and this was actually identical to the Break 2, so I suspect this is actually how it's meant to be rather than a fault, but I did spot it, so I will mention it. And that is the simple fact that when you run your finger between our butt cap there onto the bottom of the butt, you can feel that it is slightly raised, but there's definitely no sharp edge there, and it is perfectly even all the way around. And additionally, one small thing that I thought was unusual for the quality of Valhalla, a small issue with the joint. And again, this is me being fussy, but you can see on the very tip of the shaft, the last kind of half an inch, quarter of an inch, on both the shaft side of the joint and also the butt side of the joint have been brought in at a fairly sharp angle. Now the reason for that is to make sure that the diameter on the butt and the shaft matches the diameter that we have here on the joint. Because of course the joint is metal, we can't reduce the size of that, and so they actually reduce the size of the wooden elements to make sure that you get a nice flat finish between the three. Now really what should be done is this should be kind of feathered out a little bit, so you can't really see the transition, but it's really been kind of just dipped off a little bit on the end, like I said, about half an inch, maybe a little bit less on either end, so you get a slight effect that it does look ever so slightly pinched just around our joint. Like I said, just me being fussy, I'm sure most people probably wouldn't even notice that, but I did notice it, and I thought that was a little bit unusual for Valhalla. I've not really seen that issue with their cues before, and so definitely worthy of mention. But overall, it must be said that this cue, just like most Valhalla cues, really is an excellent quality cue. And it really is testament to the level of quality control that they must have at the factory that's producing these cues. There's definitely been a lot of care and attention to detail put into the production of these cues. And yes, it does show. So let's go ahead and give it its score for quality. When it comes to quality, we've yet to see a Valhalla cue that disappoints. And this is likely one of the key reasons why they have such a strong reputation for quality products at good prices. And the Jump Break 2 certainly does not disappoint when it comes to quality. The overall fit and finish is excellent, and you can see the care and attention that has gone into delivering a top quality product, scoring the Jump Break 2 a very worthy 4 stars out of 5 for quality. So at $280, the Jump Break 2 at first appearance seems to be quite expensive compared to Valhalla's playing cues. But let's make no mistake, this is a specialist model of cue, and so the selection of competing products is definitely far less. So what are the main competitors for the Jump Break 2? Well, firstly, the Rage Heavy Hitter might be worth a look, and with pricing in the $130 to $150 price range, it's definitely a good budget option. But whether it's able to match the performance of the Valhalla remains to be seen. Additionally, players actually do some very nice jump and break cues, which have a more traditional look and can be picked up for around the $230 to $250 price range. And definitely also worth a look from the McDermott stable would be the Star S2 or S86, both of which can be picked up for just $225. And although both are fairly plain in design, they do feature a wrap if that's something that interests you. And with those offering aside, there then seems to be a notable jump in price to nearer the $400 mark for cues such as the PureX and the Stinger by McDermott. And so value-wise, this likely sits slightly towards the upper end of price when compared to similar products and manufacturers. But it's most definitely not priced itself out of the market, scoring it an average 2.5 stars out of 5 for value. So let's award the Jump Break 2 with an official Average Joe's rating. And this process is very easy. We simply take the scores from across our 5 test categories, and then we'll use these to calculate the overall average. And the Jump Break 2 scores itself a decent Average Joe's rating of 3.3 stars. And it is a shame that our test model had a straightness issue that certainly held its score back a little. But of course, cues are subject to natural variation. But all that aside, what we have here is a combination of a decent enough break cue coupled with a superb jump cue. And so overall, this is definitely no slouch. And if you're in the market for a jump break cue, then this is definitely worth checking out. So there we have it, that is Valhalla's Jump Break 2. If you're in the market for a jump and break cue that doesn't break the bank, then this is definitely worth checking out. And if you are interested in buying yourself one of these cues, then please remember we will be adding those Amazon links into the video description for you. So if this video has been helpful or entertaining in any way and you want to buy one, please be sure to help us out here at Average Joe's Pool. Please click on our Amazon links. So we hope that you've enjoyed the review. Now before you leave us, we always ask you to take 1 second out of your busy schedule. Please at the very least be sure to hit that like button for us. It really does help us out. And whilst you're there with your finger on the trigger, also please click on subscribe and switch on notifications. That way you'll find out about all of our upcoming videos. So thank you for joining us once again, and until next time, listen to them, Children of the Night. What music they make.
I know a place where we can sample all the local delicacies.